Hi there, I'm Nora Crone. I'm a violist in New York City, co-founder of the Toe Project for String Players, and a musician's vocal dystonia recovery advocate. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a really interesting principle when it comes to vocal dystonia recovery, and it's the idea of seeing a whole hand versus individual fingers. If you're curious, stick around and see what you think. A very brief bit of context before I jump into that, if you're completely new here. You might want to check out some of my previous videos where I explain more about the process that helped me recover from dystonia. I will leave some links down below, but the short version is that through learning a system of playing called the Till approach with a violinist named Sophie Till, I gradually changed my brain through movement and my symptoms slowly disappeared. After 2 years of regular lessons, I returned to professional playing, and now I assist others, primarily violists and violinists, in their recovery. Okay, so the whole hand versus individual fingers. One general phenomenon that's actually quite interesting to contemplate in injury recovery, especially, is how things look versus how they actually are. So if you took any random person off the street and showed them someone playing the violin or the guitar or any one of a number of instruments and asked them what that person is doing with their left hand to play the instrument, they'd probably say they're moving their fingers. And the thing is, that's not wrong. The fingers are moving. And in fact, that's mostly what we see, at least as far as the left hand is concerned. But where we get into trouble is when what we see actually obscures the mechanism of what is going on behind the movement to make that movement possible. So if we, very understandably, see someone playing the violin and think, wow, they're moving their fingers a lot, we might say, I better get really good at moving my fingers. Actually, I should probably make sure that they can all move independently from one another so I have more control. And you know what? It seems cumbersome to have to move all of them from one spot to another, so I'm just going to leave them down on the strings until I need to move them. And that line of thinking would be quite understandable. The problem is that it completely ignores the way our fingers are designed to function, which is not in isolation, but actually as part of a unit that includes the entire hand and forearm. So just try something with me for a second. With your right hand, touch a finger to your right eyebrow. And now touch your left eyebrow. And then maybe your nose, and so on. And the question is, as you do this, what do you see? Do you see a whole hand, or do you see individual fingers? Now, for most of us, the answer is going to be, I see a hand. Now, we can touch with one particular finger and notice that their point of contact on that hand has changed, right? And yes, we can identify the individual finger that has been selected to do the touching, but if you go back and forth between touching with all of your fingers and then touching with one, you'll notice that the difference between these two experiences is actually minimal for the brain and body. In one case, the forearm has aligned its support behind several touch points, and in the other case, behind one only, but we recognize the two experiences as essentially the same. The fingers do, of course, conserve some degree of individuality. That's why we can go so quickly from one to another. But that individualized movement is proportionally very small, and it's housed within the context of a movable finger, hand, and forearm unit that aligns itself behind each finger as it touches to lend its support. So obviously, this has massive implications for our left hand technique. The old model of freezing our arm in place, leaving our fingers down on the strings, and forcing them to stretch, curl, and isolate is not going to be viable. What we use instead of that is a combination of what we call walking hand and arm and forearm rotation, along with other tools to make playing the instrument exactly the same as touching spots on our face. So the purpose of this video is not to explain all of these tools, although I will leave you some links down below if you're interested in learning more about them. Instead, the idea of this video is to give you an experiential understanding of a healthy organization of the hand and fingers in the brain and body, as well as some tools for stimulating that organization in your two hands. So one great tool is comparison. If you bring your right hand to the instrument, what do you notice? Does it feel like it did on your face, that you're seeing a whole hand rather than individual fingers? Can you see the outlines of that hand relating inward towards one another? Can you see the hand and the instrument as two different entities that are in contact, but fundamentally separate from one another? And can you experience all of those things as all of the fingers touch, and then as a single finger touches? Now let's try on the left side. Is it the same? If not, I assure you that you are not alone. Our training, which emphasizes the isolation of the fingers, leaves profound traces of programming in our brains and bodies. But the good news is that programming is reversible, or at least surmountable. So whatever differences you notice, perhaps that you really can't see the outlines of the hand clearly, or that you feel the fingers arranging themselves into a position, go back to the right side and see if you can locate the experience you want on the left side, maybe just starting with the whole hand. And then repeat it on the left side while staring in your mind at the right side, almost as if you were doing it again with your right arm. You can also repeat this process, but alternating between an everyday object or another part of the body and the instrument. And you can even use lots of different objects. In this way, we're showing the brain that the instrument is just one more object among many, all of which we relate to in the same way. Now let's explore this concept in the right arm. So if you pick up any object that you have on hand and you hold it, what do you feel? Well, for starters, you probably feel the object itself, its texture, temperature, size, and you probably feel the hand settling around it towards itself as a whole hand. If you pay really close attention, you can probably discern individual points of contact on each finger, but the predominant experience is of a whole. Now let's try with the bow. So if you immediately feel your fingers fix themselves into isolated positions on the bow, again, you are not alone. Our training often teaches us to isolate the fingers and give them special tasks. So for instance, the index finger isolates and presses the stick to create tone, for example, which obviously is ignoring the fact that we have a much better tool, which is the forearm aligned behind it. Another example is that this poor pinky is supposed to be keeping the bow level, right? As if the instrument weren't actually already doing that for us already. But if you take an object with any length at all, a water bottle or pencil, and you rest it on the spine of a book, for instance, you'll notice that none of that logic is present. You can move the object back and forth too, and what do you feel? We feel a whole hand holding an object with the support of an aligned forearm, moving it back and forth with that forearm. There is no sense at all of the fingers having independent or isolated tasks. So they each have a job to do, of course, but when that job is in complete accordance with and proportion to the way they were designed to be used, we don't experience those jobs as separate, but as parts of a whole. Once someone is able to have a similar experience on both sides or between different objects and the instrument, which may take days or weeks or more, we'll move on to the next steps in the approach, such as engaging the string, walking hand and arm, and the 4 axes of movement, or for the bow arm, the moving mechanism or string crossings. However, going forward, a really helpful point of inquiry to return to is, can I still see the whole hand being moved as a unit by the forearm, or am I seeing individual fingers operating in isolation? If the answer is the latter, that often just means that more work needs to be done in order to enable the hand to remain whole as it moves around the instrument in different contexts. However, retaining the image of the experience that we want, of a whole hand belonging to itself, can be a very important touchstone for the brain and provide a direct incentive for the body to employ patterns of movement that make that experience of wholeness possible. So I hope that was helpful. If so, please give this video a like and share it with anyone who you think could benefit from this information. If you want to know more about dystonia recovery, you can subscribe to my channel. And if you want to know more about healthy string playing in general, you can also subscribe to the TIL Project. My name is Nora Crone and my website is www.noracrone.com. Thanks everybody. See you next time.